Today we're going to take a break from the Body, Mind, Spirit 101 schedule, and we're going to give you something that you can use daily to raise your level of awareness. Go. Welcome to the I Am Podcast, where we answer all the questions about spirituality and inner peace that you ever wanted to ask, and where we learn the secrets of humanity and divinity through a better understanding of both. I am your host, Sean Webb. Okay, so you're going to find this out about me, that I have a ton of passion for getting you what you need to experience inner peace and to discover the wonderful spiritual true self within you. And that I just have a ton of things to share with you. Now, because of those two things, I'm gonna take us on some tangents from time to time, and this week being one of those times. But don't worry, we'll always get back to where we needed to go, and the tangents will always be apropos to what we had just discussed previously. So on that note, this week I want to share with you something that you can use every day while we learn about the rest of the Body, Mind, Spirit model. What I'm going to share with you is an effective tool to be able to bring yourself into a more spiritually aware presence, especially when you're finding it tough to raise your level of awareness. First, let's set the stage so that you can get the most out of what I'm about to share with you. Okay, so in episodes 2 through 5, we discussed how the search for true spirituality and inner peace comes down to discovering the difference between your false self and your true self, the difference between your egoic, worldly self and your spiritually divine self. And we know that the false self, the ego, is the thing that creates the pain and suffering in your life. And that it's the false self that you wear into the world every day because you haven't really discovered your true self yet, which is the naturally blissful, one with God in the universe, devoid of pain and suffering, you that is hiding underneath your false emotional ups and downs you. And if you need evidence that most of the world's religions and non-religious philosophies support this true self, false self secret, hit episode 2 again. Now, one of the big tricks being used today to distance your mind from your false self is called mindfulness. The trick of kicking back a little bit from your mind's chaos and observing your thoughts, feelings, and emotions from a more centered awareness. And this method works really well for short-term adjustments. A lot of spiritual teachers have exercises that help you try and observe pain and suffering from a third-person point of view. And basically what's happening with this mindful shift in consciousness on the body, mind, spirit diagram is that you're moving your awareness from your ego here, which when you're inside the ego is controlling your thoughts. And you're moving that awareness out to here. Not necessarily fully into spirit, but not fully controlled by the ego anymore. And it's from this outside the ego perspective that you can actually look back on the ego from the third person perspective and see what's going on down here and see what's going on with the equation of emotion. Those things that we talked about in episodes 4 and 5. And this is a much better perspective because you're able to see things that's going on with less emotional bias, and you're able to act on a situation that you might be in with less emotional influence. Now, the cool part of this is that you can shift out of your ego into a heightened awareness in 2 ways. The first way is when your awareness is spontaneously moved out of the ego for some reason, which happens during what we call an awakening moment and an aha moment. And you get to witness what's going on in the ego and equation of emotion without being controlled by it. Then also, the second way is that if you decide to consciously take a look at the ego and emotions that are occurring within you, your awareness, your consciousness, gets yanked out of the ego so that you have a better vantage point by default. And as a result, you can then indeed see kind of from the outside of your mind looking in from a place that's somewhat other than mind, or at least other than ego. And that's where you can consciously separate from the mess that's going on here with your ego, egoic thoughts, and emotional turmoil. Which is why spiritual teachers try to give you exercises to be mindful of your thoughts, perceptions, and emotions. And we call this raising awareness and/or shifting consciousness. Now, the whole idea behind spiritual practice is that the more you execute this kind of shift, the better you get at it. And ultimately, what's theoretically supposed to happen is that you keep working on being aware of the spaces other than ego, like out here in the body. We do yoga and exercises and breathing meditations. And we become aware of the spirit, and we become aware of the non-egoic mindful places, right? And so you get more accustomed to moving your awareness out of the ego, and then one day, something happens that you get yanked so powerfully out of your ego that you get catapulted right into the experience of the spiritual essence, right? You find your true self. You fully discover the real you under the false you. And it's this experience of your true self, the spirit, that pulls your mind into alignment with the spirit. And the result is that your mind becomes very aligned with the spiritual truth. And your ego gets an anvil dropped on it in a good way. And so this natural alignment of mind with spirit at that point is what we call being spiritually conscious or spiritually awakened. And that's when life gets a lot better than it ever had been for you. Now, in the meantime, until the larger spiritual awakening occurs, while you're practicing moving out of your ego over and over and over again, as you do that, your life gets less and less affected by the ego and its terrible consequences. And so the amount that your negative emotions affect you is drastically reduced. And the amount of pain and suffering in your life gets reduced as well. So it's all good. The practice is good. The potential sudden additional awakening is awesome. And that's why we're all here, right? To increase our spiritual consciousness and remove all pain and suffering from our lives? Okay, so now, getting to the cool thing that I wanted to share with you. The reality is, as much as we'd like to, sometimes it's hard to pull our awareness out of our egos, especially when we're in the midst of some emotional turmoil or conflict. Oftentimes, you can become too busy with trying to defend your egoic position or with juggling the thoughts of how you feel about this or that. When your ego is masquerading as you can easily get caught up in that illusion. And sometimes, it's hard to pull yourself out of the muck, because while your awareness is in the ego, you're being controlled by the ego because it's masquerading as you. It tricks you into thinking your ego is you when your awareness is inside it, and it doesn't want to relinquish that control of you. And so what I wanted to give you is a simple little tool to help you pop your awareness out of the ego at will. In our language, we use the pronouns I and me in reference to ourselves. We use both the words I and me when we're talking about the whole body, mind, spirit model. And in response to the question, who are you, like in episode 2, sometimes we say, I am me. We'll use both of them. I am me. Notice there's a duality there in that statement. There are two people in that answer. There are two pronouns to represent your one human existence, which is actually kind of indicative that your mind kind of understands the false and true selves already. The I is the spirit, and the ego is the me. Now, when we're feeling emotions, they're always being emanated from the me, from the ego, and its connection to the equation of emotion. So that is our secret weapon. Using that fact, here's what I want you to do. At any time that you need a little heightened awareness, put the word the in front of any instance where you use the word me. Put the word the in front of me, the me. Now, that may sound like a really simple change, but that one little word, it's not even a real word, it's an article, will change your life forever if you put it in front of any time that you use the word me. Think about it. You just don't understand me. A statement that could be mired in frustration turns into, you just don't understand the me. And now that statement seems a little silly. You just don't understand the me. You just don't get the fake, false self within me? Now that statement seems a little selfish, actually. You should understand this fake, false ego self within me. And what really happened there is that one little word, the, yanked your awareness right out of the ego and objectified and demoted the ego to what it is, an invented component within your mind and not the real you. Man, that really pisses the me off. You're pulled immediately up and out of your ego. Your awareness is separated from it and is much closer to the spirit than it was a moment ago. And now you can see the ego for the anger-causing monster that it's being at the moment. That really pisses the me off. That really upsets the fake version of me that's not my spiritually centered self. And then you can look at the equation of emotion to see where the problem is. And you're immediately more rational than you were a second ago when you were in the ego and experiencing that anger. You don't love the me anymore. What a moment ago was a painful statement based on your perception that you may be in a situation where you aren't loved by a particular person, which the ego can spiral into a you're not deserving of love feeling. You don't love the me anymore. Now, your pain is kind of stopped in its tracks because your awareness has been yanked into a more spiritual position. The thing that isn't being loved is just a crappy old pile of illusions. Your awareness is now separated from the thing that creates pain and suffering, and you are immediately existing in a place much closer to your true self. And these aren't just parlor tricks. This isn't a ploy to avoid emotions that you're eventually going to have to deal with later. These are the baby steps of what happens later when we drop a big anvil on your ego Wile E. Coyote style, and it stops creating negative emotions altogether. Now, the other side of this coin is when we incorrectly use the word I to speak about emotional issues. Even though the I is more aligned with the spiritual existence, we often use it to signify the ego. Like, I'm really upset, or I am angry. In our language, I can be angry. But in the spiritual existence, the I cannot be angry. So when you find yourself thinking or saying or feeling an emotion, say it this way. The me is angry. And I know it sounds weird, but that's part of the reason that it works. You're not used to hearing improper grammar. So when you force yourself to say, the me feels sad today, instead of, I feel sad today, it immediately shifts your awareness for two reasons. One, because it sounds funny, but two, it immediately reminds you that the ego is what's causing your sadness or other emotion, and that your ego is not you. And don't worry, we're going to cover the individual emotions and how they come together in a slow motion process in a few episodes. You're going to have a really strong grasp on that stuff. But for now, I just wanted to give you this little tool to help you raise your awareness up and out of your ego to a point closer to the spirit at any time that you want to. Okay, for this week's homework, practice adding the word the before any me that appears in any thought in your head or anytime you say it verbally. Then be amazed at how immediately and dramatically the shift in consciousness and awareness occurs. Do the same at any time that you have an I am statement with an emotion in it. I am upset. The me is upset. It's like a big claw. The claw pulls you right up and out of your ego and separates you from a bit of the emotional turmoil. Homework part 2. Who are all you people? And don't take that the wrong way, because I love every one of you. But here's the thing. In 2 weeks of this podcast being live on iTunes, we have thousands of subscribers. And although I'm very pleased with that fact, in just 2 weeks, we've had over 30,000 download requests from iTunes. Now, I'm psyched about that. And keep sharing the podcast with those you care about, because we're going to help everybody that joins us attain a higher level of inner peace. But I still have to ask, who are all you people? I don't know that I believe you exist. Send me an email. SeanWebb@IamPodcast.com. Prove to me you exist. Blow up my email server. And by the way, take a couple of lines to tell me what you want to see from this podcast. I'm very interested in that, by the way, because this show is actually for you. SeanWebb@IamPodcast.com. In return, I will respond personally to each and every person who sends me an email. Bury me with emails. I want to be returning emails at Christmas for this next week. 30,000 downloads indeed. Do all you people exist? Lastly, don't forget to get your free audiobook at audible.com through our free 14-day no-risk trial. Sometimes our homework includes audiobooks, and this is how to get one for free. Go to www.audibletrial.com/IamSpirituality. You get a free audiobook download, any book that you're choosing. They have over 80,000 titles, often read by the author of the book, so you get to hear how they were hearing it in their minds when they wrote it, when they read their own words. And if you support Audible.com by using our code, Audible supports us. Next week, we're back on schedule with the relative valuation system and the attachments of the mind. I promise. Don't worry, you'll be seeing the me next week. Wow. See? Peace.